Before I took office, our country was beset with communist insurgency scattered across the nation, a separatist movement that sought to divide us on the basis of religion and religion's deficiencies, and the proliferation of illegal drugs and criminality. Our armed forces were ill-equipped to deal with internal and external threats, while the police force had been overwhelmed by criminality and the drug trade problem. This is why I made it a priority to strengthen the institution, boost the morale of the men and women of the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine National Police and other armed services. Again, I thank Congress for working with the Executive Department in enhancing capabilities of the AFP and PNP through our modernization program. In 2018, we raised the salaries of our military and uniformed policemen and personnel to a level commensurate to the critical role they play in upholding national security and maintaining order. I am asking Congress to pass a unified system of separation, retirement, and pension of military and uniformed personnel to maintain government fiscal flexibility and provide adequate benefits and remuneration to our men and women in uniform. This shall apply only to the new entrants of the military and civil. Hindi ho lahat. Cannot be that we have to pay so many, even the salaries of the retired. They get a chunk of the big budget. And if we include the new entrants, the funds available for them would not be enough. It is also high time for us to pass a law providing free legal assistance to AFP and PNP officers, enlisted personnel. To help them from charges arising from incidents related to the performance of official duty. The continuous upgrading of our defense capability shall ensure that we shall uphold our territorial integrity and sovereignty from external and security threats among the new additions. We welcome the country's 2 missile-capable warships to enable us to protect our seas by providing them with necessary equipment, by enhancing their professional capabilities, and looking after the families of the soldiers would not be longer be in their company. We do not only strengthen our military and police institutions, we also inspire them to serve this nation with the highest degree of loyalty and patriotism. We enable them to carry out their mandate to defeat all enemies of the state, whatever the cost. Indeed, I am proud of the accomplishments of our troops in securing our nation against all threats to our democratic institution.
My next question, of course, to be for inclusion in the, I would say, study or deliberations of this committee. On the mandatory rate of contribution, that is item 1, for personal share of new entrants and active members, which shall be based on the monthly compensation. What is meant, or what is the component of the monthly compensation? What does it refer to the base pay and longevity pay? In the computation of the monthly pension, it is indicated that the rate is based on the MUP's base pay and longevity pay. I just want to point out so that there is uniformity on the basis of computation, whether for purposes of retirement or mandatory contribution. So,
actually ako, nandito ba DOF?
Yes, sir. ASEC Tere Habitan is here.
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Kasi you know my position, I'd rather not have any mandatory contribution because the impact is only 589 billion of the 9.6 trillion. So, well, but if the Honorable Chair, Deputy Speaker would like to pursue, Tere, how did we design? How did we design it? It's both longevity and base pay.
Chair, I'll have to check with our last computation. Pero at least base pay meron ng
Mandatory.
Yeah, mandatory.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Buboy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, taking off from the statements of Speaker Sid Ungab, this is with respect to the additional source of funding. The bill identifies for funding, I think, military assets. May I know, Mr. Chair, just for consideration of probably DND and AFP leadership in the respective position papers, number 1, how will the funds generated from the use or sale of military assets be distributed among MUP pensioners? And number 2, this is very critical, and I think we have to consider this, that part of the proceeds should also be earmarked for the AFP modernization program, that is the Republic Act 10349, because under Horizon 2 of the AFP modernization, there were 88 projects that were approved amounting to 318 billion more or less. But to date, however, the total actual release stands at only 61 billion, leaving a balance of 257 billion. Since Horizon 2 is targeted for completion by year 2022, there is a need to source for additional funding other than the annual GAA appropriations as well, probably, of the military assets. Mr. Chair, thank you.
I think my own personal, although this is parang mas good, all of it. And my position is no contribution. It's really because kung military assets, 589 billion, hindi naman naabot. Maabot lang yata ng 300 billion. Eligible years of, yun lang talang dalawa. Doon tayo magfo-focus. Tapos kung proposal is, ay babagay lang kayo, imbis ng 60 to 65 ng GSIS, 56. Kasi alam nga naman matatanda dapat nakakatakbo here, which is the indexation and the years of eligibility. But with respect,
Yes.
my own position is all military assets should be used for modernization. My position.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I share your stand.
And you leave me with no option but to cut indexation, because if you want indexation to remain, it must be funded front-loaded or by a new tax. And wala na akong makitang, if at all, it is only about 600 billion, which is very far from the 6.6 trillion net present value. I know Sid knows what I'm saying because he is an ABMP graduate of AIM. The net present value of all these liabilities is 9.6 trillion. So, there are permutation of 30%, 30% indexation or whatever. So that is for the committee to decide at a certain point once we have all the data and the position papers of the other committees of the stakeholders, as well as your committees are submitted. Magagalit sa akin dito ang DOF.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Sid.
I will join the question of Congressman Chairman Tupas later. But before I go back to that question, may I first ask GSIS if we have a resource person from GSIS here. I have this question. RA number 8291 or the GSIS Act of 1997 is explicit in Section 3 that the armed forces and the Philippine National Police are exempted as compulsory members of the GSIS. With the proposed law, the MUPs are now automatic members of the GSIS. Is there a need to amend the GSIS law, or this pension law will already amend automatically the GSIS law? That's my question for GSIS, Mr. Chairman.
You want it from GSIS or from me?
Of course, the author is the authority.
But GSIS, are you here? So GSIS, that's actually a very political issue. Political in the sense it is up to Congress. The MUP will be a separate fund, but it will only be managed by GSIS. So they are members of an MUP pension system, but management is by GSIS and other financial officials. So they're not members of GSIS. They are member of an MUP pension system.
That's clear, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me go back to the question of Congressman Tupas. Yes. Considering the complexity of establishing and sustaining the MUP Trust Fund, the burden is also on the determination of the MUP assets and other government assets to be utilized. Can we encourage the AFP, the PNP, and the MUPs to expedite the coming up of their list of available assets in order for the designated agency to assess their zonal values and for the GSIS to compute a realistic actuarial study? May we know if the AFP and the other MUPs are now ready with their asset inventories? Okay. And may I add, Mr. Chairman? Of course, I only have one vote. I will abide to the committee and the economic managers on the possibility of having a separate legislation on the disposition of the MUP assets. The reason for this is that we may encounter delays in the determination of the assets to be inventory of the previous sale of the AFP properties, which were disposed by the BCDA. Some legislators may also require actual listing and inventory of properties to be disposed before the final approval. What if we pass House Bill number 9271 as a separate piece of legislation with an initial proposed capitalization and the mandatory contribution as the main sources of funding for us to expeditiously pass this piece of legislation? with the proposed initial capitalization to be computed based on actuarial studies of the DOF and the GSIS, and perhaps pass a separate legislation on the disposition of assets as the additional funding sources, since I am afraid, and I hope I am wrong, that this will really take a long time of discussions and deliberations, both in the House and the Senate. Well, that is just my suggestion. As I have said earlier, I have only one vote. I will abide by the rule of the majority. And what will be the recommendation of this committee? I will stand with it, Mr. Chairman. I'm just voicing out my opinion. Considering also yung sinabi ninyo kanina, dalawa, you were both in agreement that mas maganda yung sale ng MUP assets and whatever property that we are going to dispose would also, part of it would also go to the AFP modernization and perhaps PNP modernization also. So para bang separate legislation siya to fund additional funding for the MUP pension benefit system and also for the AFP and PNP modernization. Well, that's just my, I would say, suggestion, Mr. Chairman. Ikaw ang author, you will be the final say, Mr. Chairman.
Consultative ako. What will pass? I only sponsor what will pass. All MUP services to submit their list of assets. I think not privatizable, baka pati mga baril bilangin nila as asset. Yung, I would say, both financial and I don't know, find a word. Christian, what would be a name? Basta, comply with just comply with the UNGA proposal.
Yes, sir. We will draft, sir.
Okay, so it will not be. Any other questions?
Last but not least, Mr. Chairman, I just don't know if I understood it. The question on the hindi na kailangan.
Yan yung principle when the bill was drafted, sir, that there is no diminution of existing benefits. We just adopted that because there will always be that from the start. I mean, you know, because reforms always create uncertainty. So we lay down the basic lay of the land. And the lay of the land is there is no diminution of benefits. So yung yan po yung proposal.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support you in this legislation. This is legislation that was needed yesterday and years ago. And thank you very much for the very much learned Joey Salceda in spearheading this bill. Congratulations, and I support you on this, Mr. Chairman.
Kaya nga, I read your credentials because that establishes your ability to question all my
Okay na ako.
Oh, okay na. So are we approving the bill? Any question from the minority?
Perhaps
I know I will not pass. I will not make it pass. That's why August 16 pa nga yung So yung mga position papers muna po ng lahat ng mga MUP units, agencies. And of course, the position papers of all the chairpersons. We will consider that and then amalgamate them and make them cohere as much as possible. Any question from the affected agencies? I'm sure Secretary Lorenzana is not very happy. Sir, please unmute.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a statement, please?
Yes, sir.
we started this MUP pension plan in 2018. In fact, we already have a bill. Medyo na-aberya lang, Mr. Chairman, kasi umangal yung nasa serbisyo dahil it will take effect immediately. That's why the proposal, the succeeding proposals will only affect those new entrants. So what I see here, Mr. Chairman, is that we have at least maybe 30 years to build up the fund, because it will only take effect on the when the new entrants will retire. Is that how that's how I understand it, Mr. Chairman. So the pensions of the current pension, my pension and the others pensioners now, and those who are leaving the service, those who are in the service now until they retire will have the same pension as we are having. Is that right, Mr. Chairman?
You will have, well, number one, if your current pension will be retained, but it will no longer be indexed.
That's okay. It's okay, Mr. Chairman. I support that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.